right, welcome to another edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. Today is November 9th. I do want to say at the top, just solidarity to everybody in the streets today. I know today is a day of action for Palestine, and so I hope folks are connecting with that wherever they are in whatever ways that they can. Um, this is a conversation that I definitely wanted to have because it is an action that is coming up starting tomorrow, going through the weekend. And I'm sure that hopefully it will build from there. But um, opponents of Cop City are planning to gather in the South River Forest for a mass nonviolent direct action this weekend. Um, we have a spokesperson from that movement um, that's joining us today to talk about what folks are doing and why they're doing it. And we'll also be connecting this to what's going on in Palestine, to the Israeli occupation forces, the IOF, sometimes referred to incorrectly as the IDF or the Israeli Defense Forces. And there's some real material connections there. And so I think as people think about the types of action that are necessary to stop the war machine, that it's important to hear from folks that take direct action and to hear their analysis of why they do it and to make those connections. And so that's part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation now, both because it's something that is going to be happening imminently, but also because it is connected to what's going on in the world right now. And before we start, I just want to give some shout outs. So we've had a few people sign up to become members of the YouTube channel. There's a join button that people can press and become members. So shout out to Isaac, Mark, Garden Nomad, Dindy, Rocio, and Tracy for their support there. And of course, folks, if you like what we do, you can also support us on Patreon. Those links, well, you can find those links. I don't know if they're in the show notes or not, but um, definitely shout out to all the folks that support us in different ways. So without a further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Sam, who is a spokesperson from Block Cop City. Sam, welcome. Thanks for joining us for this conversation today.
Hi. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I don't know how much you want to say about yourself. Obviously, there's always security concerns and things like that, but to the degree that you want to do that, can do that, you're welcome to do so. And secondly, related to that, just say a little bit upfront about what Block Cop City is and a little bit about the call to action and some of the things that are going to be coming up in the next few days.
Sure. Thanks. So I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to organizing right now. So my name's Sam Beard. That's my name. I'm a spokesperson for the Block Cop City Coalition. I've really been grateful to be able to step up in this role, especially in light of a lot of the repression that's been occurring here in Atlanta, and that's basically it's made it, it's created a situation where public roles or people who can talk to the media and talk to folks like you and all the listeners here, especially important. So I've been an organizer for like 10 years or so, and I've been working on the Defend the Atlanta Forest Stop Cop City campaign for about 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years, since 2021. And and one of the spokespeople for the Block Cop City Coalition. So, excuse me. What that is, so the Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City movement has sort of always been called a decentralized and autonomous movement. And what that sort of means is there's no center to the movement. There's no centralized decision-making body. There's no core coalition that oversees the ecosystem or something like that. It's different groups, different communities, different orgs, different people taking action sort of in accordance with their intuition or their beliefs or their desires, kind of without asking permission from anybody. And that's sort of been one of the things that's defined the movement and been one of its strengths. And of course, it also comes with difficulties too, right? Coordination and things like that. So Black Cop City is just another um, element of this decentralized and autonomous movement ecosystem where we sort of emerged over the last few months directly from conversations that came out of the 6th week of action in June of 2023 down here in Atlanta, where the movement has sort of felt at an impasse, to say the least. You know, the police murdered our comrade Tortuguita in January. There was a hyper raid on the Wilani Forest on March 5th of this year. Obscene repression, 61 racketeering RICO defendants, 41 domestic terrorism defendants, and a 2-year-long protest encampment inside of the South River or Wilani Forest in Southeast Atlanta had been lost. It had been taken. The forest has been taken over by armed police since March of 2023. And there hasn't been a protest encampment in the forest since they killed Tort, pretty much. So the 6th week of action found itself offsite at parks nearby, and it was not there was not programming events that occurred in the forest, unlike all previous 5 weeks of action that had occurred from 2021 to the end of last year, I suppose. So the movement found itself at this impasse, and we're like, well, what is needed right now in light of this repression, in solidarity with the defendants, and in order to sort of carve out new horizons in this movement that's so important to like hundreds of thousands of people around the globe, right? That have been watching this movement for years. And we decided to organize what will amount to nothing short of the largest embodied action that has ever occurred in the forest at the Cop City construction site on Monday, November 13th, shutting down construction operations and taking over the site through mass nonviolent direct action. We're sort of activating what we're calling a strategic nonviolence, and you could think of that as like juxtaposed to like a very moralistic sort of ideological attachment to nonviolence, but actually just like pushing dogmatism aside. Like, what's needed in this moment is the largest action that the largest and most diverse group of folks can feel good about participating in together, to sort of reveal to ourselves that collective action on a mass scale is indeed possible still in the Wilani Forest.
Awesome.
And I guess one more thing is the Block Cop City sort of organizing arc has been a pretty heavy lift over the last 3 months or so. It had a 80 plus city speaking tour around the continent. We can talk about that a little bit more later, but it's really been a incredible opportunity to activate folks from around Turtle Island, from across the country, from metropolitan regions, and every single region of this country, and including some rural regions too. And has been a really, just goes to show the importance of this movement to folks.
Right on. Thank you for all of that. What could you say a little bit more too about, like, I mean, so you talked about the largest nonviolent direct action that will be going on at the construction site. I think that's called the People's Stop Work Order or something like that. But what else is kind of planned, because I know that there's like I think 4 days of things that are going on, and so I was just curious if you could share some of that. Obviously, folks, you can go also to blockcopcity.org to see this information, but yeah, just if you would share some of it.
Yeah, thank you. We're calling Black Cop City it's a 4-day mobilization, a 4-day convergence happening here in Atlanta. It begins, what day is today? It begins tomorrow, Friday, November 10th, which is Veterans Day. So hopefully some folks have it off and can make it down early because of that, and continues Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Post Monday, there'll be a couple days of collective care with some care infrastructure set up around the city, potentially collective jail support and jail solidarity work as well. But what the weekend sort of looks like, I guess I'll go over the schedule and then we'll talk about the sort of like strategy and ethics inside of that. The schedule sort of like begins with a welcoming ceremony that will happen at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And that will have some folks from the Muskogee community in Oklahoma, sort of setting the tone for the weekend. Friday evening, we're having a concert at a multi-genre concert, sort of our kickoff party, Friday night at 7 p.m. at Atlanta Utility Works. That should go pretty late. We've got groups from hardcore groups, we've got ghetto house groups, we've got rappers and DJs. So we've got it all. Saturday and Sunday, sort of similar schedules those days. There'll be collective trainings and art builds and conversations about jail solidarity, which is a little bit different than what some of us think of as jail support. And we can talk about that in a little bit. And then there'll be a pair of like essentially 3-hour long kind of general assemblies. We're calling them spokes council meetings, where the action details themselves will be hashed out in real time with representation from hundreds of affinity groups from around the country coming down to basically finalize the action plan for Monday in a horizontal, sort of directly democratic fashion. So that will occur on Saturday and Sunday. Those spokes council meetings are from 3 to 7 p.m. Or something like that. Is that 4 hours? No, they're 3 hours long, hopefully. And it's a really interesting organizing style. Sometimes when one plans an action, or sorry, when one goes to an action, it's usually organized by some closed group of people who sort of just they plan the march, they plan the chants, they plan the programming events, they tell everybody when to leave sometimes, even going so far as yelling at you on a megaphone to leave and stuff like that. We're trying something very different, and we're not the first organizing arc to do this. A lot of this is influenced by anarchist organizing in the United States as well, whether that be like the World Trade protests in the 90s and things like that, standing Occupy Wall Street, as well as sort of other social movements of the past as well. But our sort of understanding is that we will move most powerfully together at this action, the most informed that all of us are, and the most sort of collective buy-in and an investment that people have in actually crafting what's going to happen. So these spokes council meetings will kind of look like, we're not starting from scratch. There's crews of folks here in Atlanta who have been crafting like a series of proposals, essentially, to bring to the spokes council meeting and say, these are some routes that we have in mind, some rendezvous points, some contingency plans, and we'd like to start here and then basically use everyone's collective brain power and desires and dreams and intuitions to make these better or change them entirely. And then Monday, to like 8 a.m, we're meeting offsite at a rendezvous location that will be announced at these spokes council meetings. And we will essentially march into the construction site and completely take it over, shut down construction operations, and probably leave later that afternoon. Yeah.
Great. And so you said something about the strategy considerations, or some of the, do you want to say more about that, kind of the strategic elements?
Sure, totally. Let's see. So we when we started with this whole organizing arc a few months ago, we sort of asked who's the target audience? Who are we trying to call in this moment? And essentially the answer was everybody who's ever been moved by the Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City movement. Everyone who is invested in this spiritually or politically or socially, or whatever. And that sort of led us to realize, well, there's going to be a lot of different types of folks here, right? We're going to have our light green, older environmentalists, our DSA types, our eco-anarchists, our civil rights activists, and everyone else who's just actually just down for the fight and doesn't fit into these fake little categories I just made up, right? And because of that, right, people are going to have a lot of different ideas for how they'd love to see Monday go. And sort of one of the reasons for all of this, instead of just organizing, this is an action that's happening, and this is what y'all are going to do as participants or something like that. Sometimes that's a very effective strategy. Sometimes that's very cut and dry. It gets something done. It keeps organizers, somewhat opaque or something like that. As opposed to this version that we've been doing, which has amounted to 80 public events around the city. The primary function of those has been the activation and catalyzation of affinity groups. So small groups of friends or trusted comrades, 3 to 10 people or something, who sort of intentionally roll out together to activate those affinity groups from around the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, and all of Turtle Island to basically converge into Atlanta this weekend and come up with this plan together. And there's a few different, when we can talk more about this in a bit, I guess, but um, you know, right now, the struggle for Stop Cop City needs to dramatically scale up its resistance, or they've begun to pour concrete at the site, right? Over this course of the summer, they've clear cut 85 acres. They've graded the land. They've done pre-construction. They fenced it off with razor wire now. And they're beginning to try to pour concrete. So we need to dramatically scale up our resistance to this campaign, or the campaign, will lose, or at least lose this element of the struggle potentially. But in addition to that, something that across the political, leftist political politics or something like that, what we've known for decades, that we need to drastically scale up our resistance to the end of the earth, and to injustice everywhere, or we're toast. Right? If we can't dramatically scale up our ability to mobilize against the end of the world, we won't win that fight. And so this is we're aiming to sort of have this be a collective experiment and a cutting edge form of collective mobilization, where folks from around the country can come in together, meet each other, encounter one another, and then craft a plan and execute it together. So that's sort of one of our strategic considerations in this style of organizing.
Right on. I think one thing that it would be helpful, I'm sure, for some folks in our audience is obviously there's been the move to do a referendum and to stop this electorally. Obviously, we have done a couple of roundtable discussions from organizers on our audio podcast that people can check out if they want to know more about kind of some of the past phases and how it got to this point. So I don't expect you to do all of the history of, the fact that there's different groups that have taken up different tactics and strategies throughout this. But basically, where is the referendum at from your perspective, your organization's perspective, and why are you doing this alongside that going on or not moving forward, basically?
Cool. Thanks for the question. Um, Maybe I'll start a little before the referendum. So, well, I guess I'll just start at the beginning quickly, though. So oftentimes, as activists or whatever we are, by the time we hear about some sort of bad, evil project, it clearly already has all this momentum behind it. It's been talked about. It becomes very apparent. It's been talked about behind closed doors for months or years, and there's political momentum, capital behind it, all of these things just ramming this thing through. And by the time we hear about it, we're completely caught on our back foot, and we have to scramble somehow to try to stop this thing, which feels unstoppable, which is not what occurred in the Defend the Atlanta Forest Stop Cop City movement. Activists sort of discovered this project before it was announced to the general public, before many Atlanta city employees, for example, even heard about this thing. And the first time that the public heard about this campaign was from folks who were against the project, right? So the language of Cop City was born, the language of Defend the Atlanta Forest, no Hollywood dystopia was born. And the Hollywood dystopia part is the Atlanta's the city in the forest, and the largest forest, the largest contiguous forest of them all, is the South River or the Weelaunee Forest. And on half of that area, they're trying to build Cop City. On the other half of that area, a hotshot Hollywood billionaire by the name of Ryan Millsap is trying to steamroll a public park, Entrenchment Creek Park, and build the largest Hollywood soundstage where they film TV shows and whatnot, east of the Mississippi there. Right now, we'll talk about the Cop City campaign because that's the one that really has captured the spotlight right now and that we're working on. But the first action that occurred against this campaign, or against Cop City, against the destruction of the Weelaunee Forest, was sabotage of 11 pieces of industrial equipment at the construction site in April or May of 2021. And that's significant for a few reasons. One, it was just sort of based. The other is that every single person who came into the movement after that time had to reckon with that as the movement's origin, right? So over the course of the last couple of years, there's been a diversity of tactics is a term that gets thrown around a lot. There's been tree sits and tree houses, forest encampments, protests, art builds, generative cultural events like music festivals, Muskogee stomp dances, various faith communities getting involved in all sorts of different ways, and civic channels of change. So in June of this year, there was a sort of bombastic Atlanta City Council meeting where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of residents flooded City Hall, flooded the auditorium, flooded the lobby, flooded outside of it. They had to close the building because there were so many people inside of it. Well, they had to close the building, right? What happened at that meeting, the reason why it was such a large turnout is because the Atlanta City Council was voting to raise the funding ceiling yet again for this project. So originally they had said it would be $31 million. Now it's over twice that. And at that meeting, they were voting to raise the funding again. And hundreds of residents spoke out against it. And what was significant, one of the things that was politically significant in that moment is the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens, has repeatedly said since day one that the only people that are against Cop City are these outside agitator, eco-anarchists, white people. And these middle-class college white people are the only people that care about this. At that June City Hall meeting, there were hundreds of local frontline community Black residents speaking out against this project. And the city council still voted 11-4 in favor of raising the funding limit for this project. The very next day, activists formed a coalition and announced this referendum push, the vote to stop Cop City. And what that is the land that Cop City is slated to be built on is owned by the city of Atlanta, and they're leasing it to the Atlanta Police Foundation, this sort of like shady nonprofit slush fund. You can think of it as like a booster club for the cops. And they are leasing it to them. So the activists in Atlanta said, we're going to gather enough petition signatures to get a votable item on the ballot. So basically like creating, like through grassroots petitioning power, creating a line item on a ballot that the general public can then vote on. That's like a democratic tool that we have here in Atlanta. And which sought to vote on the legitimacy of that land lease for the project. So basically to negate, to say lease is donezo.
Cancel the lease, I think, would probably be
cancel the lease. Thank you.
Right.
And immediately after announcing that project, Mayor Dickens came out on this bizarre political line saying that, well, no, you can't actually do that because you see, we've already signed the contract. So it would be against contract law and therefore would be unconstitutional for you to vote on this. Just this obscene line, right? And that same sort of bad faith, legal and democratic runaround has occurred throughout the course of this democratic process. Which amounted to, on the morning of September 11th, activists turned in 116,000 petition signatures. So Atlanta is 500,000 people. They needed signatures of registered Atlanta voters of voting age with an address in Atlanta who were registered to vote in 2021, and they got 116,000 of those petition signatures in a few months. And the city says, we're not even going to count those petition signatures. The very next day, Block Cop City activists announced our push to block Cop City, right? So the sort of one of the logical threads there is that activists have tried every single strategy, from direct action protests encampments to tree sits to endless comments at City Hall to 116,000 petition signatures. And the city says, we don't give, I don't know if I can swear, but we don't care. Yeah? You be swearing
You
here?
can you can swear. Yeah, it's as long as it's the way it works is if you swear too much, then they don't like it, but you can say an occasional swear word.
For emphasis. The city said, we don't fucking care.
Right.
And so we announced Block Cop City as what we sort of felt is the next logical escalation in the trajectory of this movement, where we need to reassert our capacity to act collectively together against this project. 1 second, I have to rearrange myself.
Yeah, right on. While you're doing that, hang on. Yeah. One of the things that I did want to talk to you about today too is the connections between Block Cop City and Palestinian resistance, or also the connections, as we talked about a little bit at the top, between settler colonialism, racial capitalism, but specifically, there's some material connections between the Israeli Defense Forces, or the Israeli occupation forces, rather, and the Atlanta area, including, for instance, there's corporate connections that are made in this document. People can check this out. This is a statement that's on your all website. I won't read the whole thing, but obviously there's corporate connections between groups like Coca-Cola and Bank of America, which support both the Israeli occupation force and Cop City. There's also something that's called the Gilley Exchange, or the Gilley Program, which is Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program, which is located at Georgia State. Um, and then there's been training, and this is something that happens at a lot with a lot of police departments around the United States, is that when it comes to learning counterinsurgency tactics, counterterrorism tactics, that a lot of times there are exchange programs between Israeli forces and local police departments, or in this case, you also have Georgia State Police, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which is like the state's version of the FBI, essentially. And so, just wanted to draw folks' attention to these connections and see if there's anything that you wanted to say specifically about those as well.
Yeah, thanks for uplifting that stuff. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of it. When the Cop City project was announced, it was revealed that over half of the law enforcement agencies that would be training at the facility, if it's built, are from out of town, out of state, and out of the country. And which is an interesting juxtaposition to this language of outside agitators and this sort of like pushback against being able to protest somewhere other than where you live, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But of course, the protectors of capital can, get flown all over the world to learn how to tighten their grip on the globe. And it was revealed that the Israeli Defense Forces, I keep calling it that, the IOF, the Israeli Occupying Forces, would be coming here to Atlanta to be trained up in what was essentially slated to be the most one of the most premier law enforcement training facilities on the globe. the largest law enforcement training facility in the entire country and maybe in the globe, complete with a mock city so that, right, you were saying, folks, they can practice contemporary counterinsurgency, urban warfare tactics. And, some documents were just revealed that a few different high ranking uh, Georgia based law enforcement agencies and Atlanta Police Department officials were slated to go to so called Israel to train up with the IOF over there and bring some of their knowledge back here. And the money, the through lines of the money is there, right? We talked about there's some of these same funders who are invested in both of these things, as well as just the large parallels of, Israel's a settler colonial project, right? Essentially serves as the United States's henchman in the Middle East to sort of like do a lot of our dirty work or whatever over there, right? There's that just like jarring Biden video from the 80s or something where he's like, were there not an Israel, we would have to invent an Israel, right? um and over the last few weeks, I think a lot of us have been like, since the ongoing genocide of Gaza and the West Bank amplified over this last month, a lot of people have been wondering, what can we do to fight this, right? And some of it's amounted to just sort of never-ending Instagram posts, which, don't get me wrong, keep posting those things on Instagram. That we have to stay informed, and a lot of massive, massive marches that have occurred around the country, amounting to the largest, I think, protests in Palestinian for Palestinian solidarity in this country's history, right? But one of the premier ways that we can stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people is to their oppression is buttressed most by the United States of America and our military, our police apparatus, our militism apparatus, the war machine. And one of the most effective things that we can do here in America is to attack the United States imperial arm back home, and to attack sites of physical infrastructure sites that aid in that global settler colonial project, right? And one of the premier ground zeros right now for that struggle, with direct through ties to Israel and to the Israeli oppression of the Palestinian people, is Cop City. And if folks have been looking for something in addition to the protests, and in addition to spreading the word and talking to their family members and the people they care about what's going on in Palestine right now, we'd encourage you to come to Block Cop City and help continue to attack the Cop City project, because it sort of is serving as ground zero for this new paradigm of global policing that the Israeli occupying forces seem to have perfected, right? Every Palestine and Gaza have sort of served as a testing ground for cutting edge surveillance technologies, cutting edge ballistic technologies, cutting edge policing and militarized control technologies, borders and impermeable fences and things like that. It's sort of serving as a testing ground globally for those tools of oppression. And Cop City is in the same political lineage as that stuff.
Yeah, right on. And I think that's all true. So I guess one of the things that I would also want to ask you about, right, is obviously the Stop Cop City movement, as you've talked about already. All the folks that have faced RICO charges, all the folks that have faced these sort of terrorism enhancement, charges and things like that. Um, you know, there's kind of 2 points I guess I would draw folks to around that. I mean, one is sort of understanding the purpose of these laws, and the use of these laws against folks who are literally just organizing for a better world, right? And I think that, um, that's something where we can see connections to the demonization of Palestinian resistance as a whole, but also, to folks who are organizing against the Cop City, complex, and all of the things. There's a lot of connections we've made in past episodes about it, but obviously this is a struggle that is an environmental, ecological struggle. It's a struggle against policing and imprisonment and surveillance. Um, and it's a struggle against the forces that defend capitalism. It's all of these things. It's connected to all of these things. Um, but I think that one, I guess, so putting that aside for a second, or using that as context, one thing that I would say or ask is, obviously, knowing that your movement has faced a lot of repression, um, you know, maybe say a little bit about, among the folks that you're in community with, the thing that keeps you going, and how do you think about I mean, knowing you, like, for instance, you mentioned jail solidarity earlier. Obviously, you're anticipating, or at least trying to be ready, that it is quite possible or even likely that several folks will end up getting arrested as a result of these actions that you're planning as well. And so I know for some folks that would be enough for them to say, well, I don't really want to be a part of that. But obviously, you guys are continuing, you folks are continuing to struggle on. So maybe just talk a little bit about thinking around that.
Yeah, thanks. I think you set the stage really comprehensively. It's like, as with any social movement, political action, protest action, as with any of this stuff, the risk of participation is inherent, right? Um, we've been trying to be pretty clear about what people who are coming to Atlanta, or people who are in Atlanta and activating for this, what risks that they might face by participating. We've been trying to be very clear about that. It's like, we don't want to, people need to make an informed decision that makes sense to their, to their soul and to their community and to their form of life, and if they have kids and all this shit, right? They have to take those things into account, and the only way to actually make a informed decision on whether or not they want to roll out is to sort of know what the stakes are. And a lot of people do already, but we want to make that stuff available. So we sent out a couple different packets about the potential political consequences that could arise, while at the same time, like, knowing that the risk of inaction far outweighs the risk of action in this moment. And sometimes that feels a little bit more abstract, but when we talk about the concrete realities and the through lines to the Palestinian people, the through lines to ecocide, the through lines to corporatocracy, or just hellish capitalism 2.0, or whatever it is that we're descending into, it becomes strikingly clear, right? We look at what they're trying to do with the criminalization of dissent, the criminalization of effective protest tactics against ecocidal white supremacist projects, calling people terrorisms on a scale that terrorists in America on a scale that hasn't been seen in years and maybe ever, and obscenely austere political legal consequences for participation in this movement. The worst, like, one of the primary functions of that is to sort of bludgeon us into submission, to sort of scare us into inaction. And one of the beautiful things about the Defend the Atlanta Forest movement is every time that the state has come down with an iron fist, the movement has grown stronger. Every single time the state comes down with austere repression, the Atlanta Solidarity Fund becomes that much more efficient in its operation. The amount of people doing jail support, doing care work, doing this sort of like relationship building, this transformative like relationship building, increases. The number of people who care about the movement increases. They murdered our comrade, and millions of people around the world were horrified, and hundreds of thousands of them were mobilized into action, right? Or at least tens of thousands of them. And we one of the things I think that's like kept us going, and like, this is going to sound a little cheesy, but just like we all know we're on the right side of history, And we have to think that some of them know they're on the wrong side of history, right?
Right on.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. Of course it's scary, right? Um, and we think that people should take the risk levels that make sense to them. That's sort of that's another one of the reasons why we're doing this very horizontal organizing style, this very public organizing style, is so that people know how to plug in and know if they want to. Um, I think when we're faced with a historical moment like this, um, a lot of the most beautiful things in this world are on the other side of fear. And, I'm not encouraging anyone to go past their gut feeling, because like that's actually the feeling that you need to listen to, the feeling of your community, the feeling of the people who rely on you, the people you rely on, and your gut feeling. But a lot of our gut feelings are saying that we have to go hard on this campaign, because this has been the sort of tip of the spear in this country for eco-abolitionist movements for a few years, right? It's by far the most resonant environmental justice campaign since Standing Rock, right? It's by far the most resonant and politically powerful and successful abolitionist campaign since the George Floyd rebellion. And a lot of people, I think, because of that, after the sort of the feeling of the unknown that a lot of us experienced kind of for the first time in 2020, first with COVID and then with the George Floyd rebellion, right? The largest uprising that most people in this country who are alive have ever seen. And then by the time that it sort of crescendoed and started descending back down, people were really eager, I think, to find another struggle to support. And I think the Defend the Atlanta Forest struggle has sort of served as essentially the cutting edge of decentralized, autonomous, eco-abolitionist resistance in this country, and people have been pretty moved by it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I get moved just hearing you say what you just said. And I mean, I'm somebody who, like Rose here, is scared. I mean, and I am a parent. And so that also factors into my own level of, how I think about risk and what that means. But I deeply am grateful to you and all of your comrades that are more courageous and willing to to take up these struggles in the ways that you do. I would say, yeah, so Rose asked the question here, which I think is a good question, which is like for folks of us who are like, yeah, I'm not going to do that because I am fearful of the consequences of it. What's the best way that folks can support the block cop city movement, the defend the Atlanta forest movement, etc.?
Thank you, Rose, for this question. This question rules and is also being asked by a ton other people, right? I hope to be a parent one day, and when I am, hopefully, if I am, I'll maybe change the way I move through the world too, right? Um, I think to that question, um, it actually blows my mind how even right here in Atlanta, talking to people, I went to a show for one of my friends was playing a show the other day, and I was talking to folks there about the campaign, and so many people here in Atlanta don't even know about it, um, let alone around the world. I mean, honestly, one of the most important, this feels a little bit butterfly effect, a little bit like woo woo and something like that, but like talking to the people you care about the things that you care about, um, is huge, right? Like I don't want to just call it like reduce it to political education or something like that, but having transformative political educational conversations with the people that you care about and like developing a sort of shared perception on some of these things with your homies, with new friends that you might encounter, with your coworkers, depending on the coworker, of course. Um, you know, uh, is one of the most politically powerful things that we can do as people, you know. In addition, besides that really abstract thing, um, there's a website, stopcopcitysolidarity.org. There's a bunch of Cop City websites, but the Solidarity one has a sort of interactive map of targets around the country. whether they be your Bank of Americas or your Nationwide or your other funders or things like that. And hosting protests over there that are lower risk protests, right? You can even do legal ones over there. I think financial support is always huge. That's not the first thing that I like to go to. I think there is going to be some sort of public um, uh, uh, give better, give butter. I don't know what it's called. GoFundMe, something like that. That should be coming out in a day or two for Black Cop City. The Atlanta Solidarity Fund, which is sort of one of the premier, I don't want to say premier, but one of the most efficient and effective and large scale, like municipal level solidarity funds, bond funds in the country, is, just bailed out 59 of the 61, or bonded out 59 of the 61 RICO defendants here in Atlanta. And I would imagine that probably tapped a lot of their financial reserves pretty heavily. So distributing fundraiser links for the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, or a local bond fund, bail or bond fund in your own municipality or your own region. Yeah, I think between those things, organizing a protest, donating, but talking about this stuff with the people you care about, people in your community, um, having those conversations can change the course of your life, right? Can change the course of your friend's life, can change the dynamics of your relationship and open up entirely new horizons. And we should never discount those sort of like collective experiences with the people we care about.
Yeah, right on. Listen, I almost, I'm gonna let you get out of here in a few minutes. I know that you have a lot of work to do in preparation for everything going on over the next few days. One of the things that I do want to, you touched on it a few times in this conversation. I think it's really important for people to think about this, though. Is you know, what do you see as Why do you see direct action as such an important aspect of struggles? Um, and I think this is really important to just talk about in the context of both, Cop City, defend the Atlanta forests, but also as people are thinking about, um, Palestine right now, right? Like as you mentioned, like we've had a lot of protests, we've had a lot of mass actions. All of those things are good for what they are. They are, I think, important for a number of different reasons. Um, but they also don't do certain things, and there's a difference between what they are and direct action. And I know direct action sometimes can be a pretty broad term, but maybe say a little bit about what you think about in terms of direct action.
Thanks. There's this line from the streets during the George Floyd rebellion. Um, no good cops, no bad protesters, right? And the Defend the Atlanta Forest movement sort of took that and it ran with it. No good cops, no bad protesters. And one of the things is it sort of amounted to, because so many people have different ways of, they have different levels of comfortability, like we just saw from one of the listeners here, right? We've got different ways that we want to move through the world, or that we feel like we're able to with our certain life circumstances. And people want to contribute and generate meaning in their lives and help actualize their values. And people have different ways of doing that, right? One of the beautiful things of the Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City movement has been um, sort of a movement-wide pact to refuse to publicly condemn other arms of the movement. And we saw it sort of go both ways, where this sort of like, the insurrectionary direct action, hardcore ungovernable energy didn't chastise and make fun of the electoralists, who sometimes maybe they might. And the other side is we saw these folks who were grinding ceaselessly on this referendum push, who made some very intentional collective decisions to not chastise people who were deploying tactics that disagreed with their sensibilities. And that sort of really created this rich culture of like, actually, we're all climbing this mountain together, which is sort of like a Hong Kong pro-democracy protest line or something like that. And you know, the importance of direct action for me is like a few fold, I suppose. Like one is like so much of our lives, I feel like, are we have so little say in so much of this, you know? We like have to go to work, we have to pay the bills, we have to do this, do that, do this, do that. And it sort of creates this baseline phenomenon of like, we're not actually in control of our lives and we don't have the power to change things. And I feel that profoundly and have for years and years and years. And I probably will again soon. You know, it ebbs and flows. We all feel it. um I think, but demonstrating to ourselves and to the people we care about that we are capable of changing things simply by doing it. You know, there's this, I don't know where I heard it, but you know, acting as if you already are free or something like that. I've heard all sorts of different political communities use that same sort of sensibility, you know. And I think what that comes down to is a sort of like existential direct action or something like that. Like we actually just we need to, and sometimes it takes, sometimes you got to muster some of that energy that might not be there that day, you know. And sometimes it means resting, right, and giving yourself some grace. um but like, you know, direct action is a very big term, right? We've been talking about this nonviolent mass action. Some people have called it civil disobedience. Some people haven't called it that. They've called it direct action. Sometimes something feels more symbolic than it does feel direct or something like that. And all of those, you know, all of that stuff is good and dandy, and I appreciate all that stuff too. And at the same time, it's like one of the important elements of the work that we do is this sort of transformative potential for all of the participants in it. You know, um, the tens of thousands of people who were standing outside of the third precinct on May of 2020, all of those people's souls were fundamentally changed for the rest of their lives. You know, they saw what their fellows are capable of. They saw, they felt what they're capable of, and and it sort of served as a, like, you know, mass activation of hundreds of thousands of people around the country as a call for that, right? um, and what we've seen here in Atlanta is just profound resonance with different elements of direct action too, right? Where, you know, we had these tree sits in the forest, in solidarity with like Young Thug and all political prisoners and people who are just like, we're just going to actually live in this tree, you know. And then there's been other smaller direct actions too, where, you know, just yesterday, sorry, the days are all bleeding together. I think it was yesterday, there were 3 or 4 elders who locked down in front of the construction site, in Atlanta, and shut down construction operations that morning. Um, and while all of these different types of actions are all in sort of different leagues of intensity and leagues of risk, they all mean something profound to the people who are participating in it, and they're all inspiring to to so many people that we'll never meet, you know. Um, Sorry, I just be rambling sometimes.
No, 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 that's great. Thank you. That was a great answer. Sam, just really appreciate you. Really appreciate the work that you all are doing. I wish you the utmost success. And yeah, just keep us posted. Emma said, this is funny. I will say that it is Kamau in some sense because I did reach out to Kamau and Kamau said no, you should talk to them right now. So folks who thought we were going to talk to Kamau today, just know that that I don't know if he would want me to say this, but Kamau pointed me in in y'all direction, and I think that's a good example of what you've talked about earlier in terms of the kind of ecosystem around the movement to stop Cop City. Is that It is a variety of different groups that take up a variety of different tactics, and that there isn't a sense of like and I won't. I mean, who knows? Some people may feel certain ways about certain things. I'm sure that there's disagreements. I'm sure that there's, conversations that happen behind closed doors and things like that. But I do appreciate the way that you all uplift the different facets of your movement and don't, uh, there's not a desire to condemn one half for taking a certain set of actions or taking a certain approach, even if it's different than what other folks are doing. And so that's, I think, a very healthy thing that we should all also think about in terms of both your movement, but also the movement. And I know these are connected. I don't mean to separate them out, but thinking folks who are thinking about how to take action in response to Palestine. There's a lot of folks who have been trying to think through different direct actions, whether that's the attempts to stop the boats that are bringing weapons to Israel, or whether it's going after Elbit Systems, which is a weapons manufacturer, or things like that. I think it's important, even if we're not going to engage in some of those things for whatever reason, that we also still feel really comfortable uplifting those and sharing them because others may be ready to take on those kinds of actions. And I don't think we should try to dissuade or discourage anybody from taking actions that they are comfortable taking or want to take. And I think the other thing, I even earlier, as I said, the thing about being a parent, I mean, my feelings around that are so conflicted with the state of the world, because it's like, is it, one of the things I always think about is, will my kids look back and say, "Dad, you didn't do enough?" Like, honestly, of like, this is the world that we've inherited, that your generation, didn't take bold enough action to stop. And I think that's something that we have to really sit with and think about as well. Even those of us who are parents who are like, I don't, I think about the impacts of taking action. We also have to think about the impacts of not taking action too. So salute to you, Sam, and salute to all your comrades and all the folks that are going to be taking action over these next few days in Atlanta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got all emotional right there at the end about yeah. You know,
No worries.
we we're heading into really uncertain times, and I really like the word you used, uplift. We just have to OMG. Wow, where did you get that? That rules, Megan. Um, we just have to love and support each other, right? Um, and I think we've seen that a lot in this movement too. There's all sorts of stuff happening in Atlanta this weekend. Kamal's group, Community Movement Builders, as well as some other of their partners, are organizing a week of action in a distributed fashion around the city, sort of targeted at Black and Indigenous folks from around Atlanta and around the country to come and share space and share community and share political education and powerful opportunities together. And at the same time, there's this Black Cop City convergence happening. There's even other cultural events, and there's pop-up, the People Stop Work Order, things like that. There's other protests, and it's just like there's a multiplicity of tactics. There's a mosaic of communities and organizations and people just like trying to do the damn thing in whatever way makes sense to them, and it rules. Thank you so much for having us on the show. And if folks who are thinking about coming down to Atlanta or who live here, blockcopcity.org will have this schedule posted with the locations of all of the programming events over the course of the weekend, the first of which start tomorrow, the welcoming ceremony and the kickoff show at Atlanta Utility Works. And if you go to any of the events over the weekend, you'll find information on how to plug into all the rest of them. So keep your eyes peeled on the construction site on the morning of November 13th, this coming Monday. And help us get the word out, especially, regardless of what happens that day.
Right on. Yes, encourage folks to definitely check out everything you're doing, and if they're in the area, to support if they can, for sure. Thanks again, Sam. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.